You are listening on Garden Story. If you enjoy it, please like, comment, and subscribe. Wishing you happy listening. My older sister married the factory director's son and got him a secure office job with guaranteed permanent employment. Meanwhile, I married a poor technician who had spent his days chasing after my sister, trying to win her favor. The entire factory mocked him, saying he had no prospects. 10 years later, the factory was restructured. The director's son failed in business and lost all his capital. My sister also lost her job and had to survive doing manual labor for hire. My husband quit his job to start his own business. Thanks to his electronics repair skills, he gradually built up a small company that grew larger and larger, eventually becoming a renowned entrepreneur in the city. When we returned to our hometown, we happened to encounter my sister at the market, arguing with someone over just a few coins. Her face looked utterly haggard. Seeing us step out of our newly purchased car, my sister went completely mad and lunged toward us. Didn't he say back then that all he wanted in this life was to make me live comfortably? Why? Why did I have to suffer for so many years, while you ended up enjoying all the benefits? My sister grabbed me and dragged us both toward an oncoming truck. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the moment of our engagement preparations all those years ago. I had died, dragged to my death by my own sister, Haley Lane, as we both crashed into that truck. The truck couldn't brake in time and let out a long, desperate honk. The last image I saw was my sister's face, twisted and ugly with jealousy. Why? He clearly said back then he wouldn't marry anyone but me. He said all he wanted was for me to live well. Why did I have to suffer all those years while you got everything good in the end? Her hoarse, venomous voice pierced straight through my heart like a poisoned blade. When I opened my eyes again, I was sitting in my family's living room, with my mother's sharp voice tinged with disappointment ringing in my ears. Haley, are you running a fever and talking nonsense? Instead of marrying the director's son, you insist on marrying that poor Victor Chen? Don't you know what his family situation is like? 5 people crammed into that run-down dormitory building. Does his monthly salary even cover buying new clothes for you? I startled and looked around at the familiar scene. My sister sat across from me on the sofa, crying her heart out. My heart raced wildly. I had been reborn, returned to 10 years ago, the very day before both my sister and I were to decide on our engagements. In my previous life, after Mother said those words, Haley had lifted her head high with smug satisfaction. Mother, of course I'll marry Lucas Zhang. Who would refuse a life of comfort? My gentle little sister suits someone honest like Victor. But now my sister was gripping Mother's hand tightly, crying and shaking her head. Mother, I absolutely must marry Victor. So what if Lucas is the director's son? He's just a spoiled playboy. I don't like him. Victor treats me well and will surely have prospects in the future. Trust me, Mother. I closed my eyes, hiding the cold gleam in their depths. It seemed I wasn't the only one who had been reborn. My dear sister had also returned with memories from our previous life. In our past lives, my sister had married the director's son Lucas, and gotten him a comfortable office position, holding on to the permanent employment that everyone envied. Meanwhile, I married the poor technician Victor, who had only ever had eyes for my sister and constantly sought her approval. 10 years later, the factory changed ownership. Lucas failed in business and lost everything. My sister also lost her job and had to sell vegetables at the market to survive. My husband Victor, relying on his skilled hands, went from repairing electronics in a small workshop to opening a company and establishing a factory, becoming a famous entrepreneur in the city. When we returned to visit our hometown, driving our newly purchased Santana, we encountered my sister arguing loudly at the market over a few vegetables. Seeing me step out of the car in elegant attire, my sister's eyes filled with jealousy and resentment. And then the tragedy occurred. Now my sister had also returned, thinking she held the secret code to future wealth. She was eager to steal away the fortune that had been mine in our previous life. Mother continued patiently trying to persuade her foolish daughter. Did Victor cast some spell on you? Working in an office as a cadre's wife and living comfortably afterward, wouldn't that be better? Finally, Mother's gaze settled on me with a commanding expectation. Vivian Lane, your sister doesn't understand, but you must understand. You should persuade your sister to marry into the director's family. I raised my head, showing a fearful expression tinged with grievance. Yes, Mother, I'll listen to you. But sister, seeing that I was being obedient, Haley immediately wiped away her tears, a smug smile appearing on her face. My sister stepped forward and patted my shoulder gently, her voice carrying an undisguised sense of superiority. "Little sister, this is unfortunate for you, but don't worry. Lucas isn't a bad person, just a bit playful. He's not like my Victor, who's honest and ambitious." My sister deliberately emphasized the words, "my Victor. This blessing from heaven, I'm leaving it for you." My sister thought she had stolen the fortune heaven had granted me. But she had no idea that Victor's success wasn't because his name was Victor, but because in our previous life, his wife was Vivian. If my sister wanted this blessing, she could take it. I wanted to see whether, without me as the catalyst, Haley could create a successful businessman like in our previous life. In the end, Mother still couldn't argue with Haley, which wasn't surprising. From childhood to adulthood, Haley had always been the center of attention in our household. My sister was beautiful, sweet-tongued, and knew how to act coquettish, making our parents revolve around her and dote on her. I was quiet and introverted, like a shadow. In our parents' eyes, Haley was a precious gem that needed to be treasured, while I was the foundation who should know my place and make sacrifices. To smoothly marry Victor, Haley used the same tricks from our previous life. First, she mysteriously claimed she had dreamed of divine guidance, saying Victor was a hidden dragon beneath the abyss who would surely achieve great success in the future. Our parents naturally didn't believe her, thinking she was talking nonsense. Then she predicted that the next day, Master Wang, the machine repairman, would be caught in the machinery and lose a finger due to improper operation. Our parents were half believing, half doubting. Father, being the workshop supervisor, repeatedly warned Master Wang to be extra careful that day. The next day, because Master Wang had argued with his wife, his mind was distracted. The moment he lost concentration, he really did lose half a finger. This incident made our parents look at Haley completely differently, though they were firm believers in science. When this happened right before their eyes, they still felt shaken. "Haley, did you really dream this?" Mother gripped Haley's hand, her voice trembling. Haley put on an air of, "I told you so but you didn't believe me," and acted mysteriously profound. "Mother, this is heaven's will. Victor and I are destined by heaven, blessed by divine revelation in my dreams." Our parents looked at each other, their expressions changing from doubt to awe. They truly believed now. They believed that Haley was guided by divine spirits, carrying heaven's blessing, so the whole family happily prepared for my sister's wedding to Victor. Meanwhile, Mother called me aside privately, repeatedly instructing me that after marrying into the Zhang family, I must obediently serve my in-laws, take care of Lucas, and not bring shame to the Lane family name. Haley finally achieved her wish. She looked at me with eyes full of pity mixed with showing off. "Little sister, you must learn to be a good daughter, in-law. The director's household isn't like ours, they have many rules. Looking at your quiet personality, be careful not to get bullied without even daring to cry." I bowed my head, my eyes red as if about to cry. "Sister, I understand, I'll be careful." Haley grew even more pleased, and took off the silver bracelet from her wrist to give to me. "Consider this compensation for taking my place in that marriage. Little sister, just enjoy being the lady of the house for a few comfortable days." Watching her sway away smugly, I couldn't help but let the corners of my mouth curve upward. Pity me. Pity me for what? Pity that I was about to marry into the wealthiest family in the factory. Pity that I only had to endure a useless husband for a few years to hold several houses in my hands, which would be worth millions in the future. Haley could never understand that Victor's success wasn't due to some divine guidance, but thanks to years of exploration and research, combined with the unwavering support of the wife beside him. In our previous life, the blueprints and components he scattered around carelessly, I treated them like treasures and stored them carefully. But in this life, falling into my sister's hands, I feared they would only become scrap metal and waste paper cluttering her sight. My sister and I married on the same day. In the late 1980s, within the factory's residential compound, weddings were always the most exciting events. Early in the morning, the Zhang family's wedding procession had arrived. A brand new black Santana with a large red flower on the hood, followed by 2 escort jeeps. In an era when bicycles were still valuable possessions, this wedding procession was truly shocking. The entire factory, from old to young, whether they had work or not, all stood packed on both sides of the road to watch the spectacle. Tisk-task, truly the director's family so grand. The second daughter of the Lane family is truly blessed. She stepped into the clouds in one move. Wearing a bright red traditional wedding dress, I was led by Lucas to the car amid everyone's envious gasps. Through the car window, I saw Haley standing in the crowd. My sister's complexion looked terrible. Green with jealousy, nearly biting through her lip. Although my sister knew that Victor would be the wealthiest person in the future, at this present moment, this unique moment of glory belonged to me. Women's jealousy sometimes cannot be suppressed even by rebirth. Not long after, Victor also arrived. He didn't have a car, only riding an old bicycle that had been polished to a shine, with a red flower tied to the handlebars, and a thermos bottle hanging below the flower. That was the entirety of his possessions. He stopped in front of Haley, drenched in sweat, smiling awkwardly. The surrounding crowd burst into loud laughter. Haha, this Victor really has guts, daring to marry the eldest daughter of the Lane family. Haley must be blind, abandoning the director's son to choose this poor wretch. Haley's face turned red, then white, but finally forced a smile and climbed onto the back seat of Victor's bicycle. Little sister, enjoy this heaven-sent blessing. Before getting on the bike, my sister passed by my car window and repeated this phrase. Though her tone was so sour that even through the car window, I could smell it. I nodded gently and gave her the most gentle and obedient smile. Yes, sister. I was indeed delighted. The Zhang family's new home was a 3-bedroom apartment with a courtyard that the factory allocated to cadres. Fully furnished with floors polished so bright you could see your reflection. Victor's new home was a small room partitioned off in the dormitory compound. Just a bed and a table took up almost all the space, making it difficult to even turn around. That evening, Lucas came home drunk, helped by friends into the room, and collapsed on the bed like a dead man. I didn't mind, in fact, the quieter it was, the better. I closed the door and took out a small notebook from my diary, which recorded all the personal money I had saved over the years, a total of 326 yuan and 50 cents. Not much, but it was quite a sum at that time. Then I began calculating in my head the Zhang family's assets, the factory allocated apartment, my in-laws' savings, my mother-in-law's gold jewelry. And furthermore, in a few years, a small southern city called Shenzhen would experience miraculous rapid development. Haley thought she had stolen a man, but in reality she had missed an entire era. My days as a daughter-in-law in the Zhang household were more comfortable than I had expected. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Susan Wang, was a typical director's wife, not highly educated, having lived her whole life in others' admiring gazes and flattering words. She was somewhat vain but not mean-hearted. Through a lifetime of experience, I had shed the sullen nature of my youth. Now I was sweet-tongued, quick-handed, and skilled at flattery, which made my mother-in-law very happy. Within just a few days, she was affectionately calling me Vivian. My father-in-law, Director Kenneth Zhang, was the factory director who usually spoke little but was quite satisfied with me. Since my family had a clean background, and I appeared to everyone as a gentle, mild girl with a good reputation, the most difficult person to deal with was my newly married husband, Lucas. He was a young man who had been overly spoiled, holding only an idle position in the factory. His daily routine consisted of gathering with friends to drink and play cards, only returning home at night. In the first few days after our wedding, he was still polite to me. But very quickly, everything returned to his old lifestyle. I didn't argue or make a fuss about it. I knew that dealing with someone like Lucas, being rigid would be useless. I had to go with the flow. If he liked face, I gave him face. When he wanted to show off to his friends, I would sit beside him pouring wine and serving food, looking at him with admiring eyes. When he lost money gambling and came home complaining, I would give him my personal money, gently saying, "It's okay, you'll win it back next time." Lucas indeed enjoyed this treatment greatly. He began to feel that marrying me was a profitable deal, getting a beautiful wife with a gentle temperament who always supported her husband. Taking me out made him look good. Gradually, he was willing to listen to what I had to say. When the timing was right, I began my transformation plan. That day, the whole family was having dinner. While serving food to my in-laws, I casually mentioned news from the newspaper. Father, mother. Today I read in the newspaper about a place in the south called Shenzhen that's developing very rapidly now. Many people are going there to do business and getting rich quickly. Mother-in-law pursed her lips. What can those rural places develop? Only people with nothing better to do go there. Our family has stable employment, who would be foolish enough to go suffer there? That was the common thinking of most people at that time. I smiled and continued, I think so too. But the newspaper also said that land there is very cheap now. With the money to buy one apartment in our factory, you could buy a large plot of land there to build a house. I was thinking, If our family also bought one there, when Lucas goes on business trips in the future, he'd have a place to stay, saving the trouble and expense of renting. And we could tell people outside that our family has a big house in Shenzhen. That would be quite impressive. The words, quite impressive, hit the Zhang family's weak spot perfectly. Lucas immediately became interested. Exactly, father. Very impressive. Later I can tell my friends that our family has a big house in Shenzhen. Let's see who dares say I'm just living off others. My father-in-law frowned. He still found this matter unreliable, but the words from his wife and son had shaken him. The factory director position was facing fierce competition. He needed achievements and stories to boast about to secure his position. If he could casually reveal in a meeting that he had vision, and had invested early in the special economic zone, that would certainly be a major point in his favor. Seeing his expression soften, I knew this matter had a chance. I had no intention of saving Lucas, nor did I intend to save the Zhang family. I just wanted to use them to secure a stable, prosperous future for myself and for the child not yet showing in my belly. Half a month later was the day to return to my parents' home. Lucas deliberately borrowed the factory's driver and Santana to drive me home in style. The car had just stopped in front of the residential compound and immediately attracted numerous neighbors' gazes. My mother smiled radiantly, taking my hand and turning to show off to everyone. This is my second son-in-law, driving his car to bring Vivian home today. Lucas was praised until he was floating, taking out various bags from the trunk, cigarettes, liquor, candy, tea, making the neighbors exclaim endlessly. We had just entered the house when Haley and Victor also returned. The two of them had walked there. Victor also carried several items, but compared to Lucas's gifts, they looked quite shabby. As soon as Victor saw Lucas in the house, he immediately became tense, not knowing where to put his hands. Haley's expression also wasn't pleasant, but she still forced a smile and sat down. At the dinner table, the atmosphere was somewhat strange. My mother was completely different from usual, treating Lucas with extreme enthusiasm, constantly serving him food and asking about work at the factory, while being almost indifferent to Victor. Haley felt uncomfortable and hurried to score points. Mother, don't think Victor is just a technician now, he's very smart. My sister picked up a piece of meat and put it in Victor's bowl, speaking loudly. He has ideas in his head that you wouldn't understand, Mother. He'll definitely be better than Lucas in the future. Lucas had drunk a bit and chuckled disdainfully upon hearing this. Sister-in-law, you can't just talk your way to success. I work in the factory's administrative office and hear my father in meetings every day. The future trend is economics, not tinkering with scrap metal. What did you say? Haley's face turned red with anger. Victor gently tugged at her sleeve, whispering, Haley, say less. You're wrong. Haley shook off his hand, her voice even louder. You really have no backbone. If you're so capable, show them what you can do now. The atmosphere at the dinner table immediately froze. Father tried awkwardly to smooth things over, while Mother's expression had turned quite unpleasant. I kept my head down eating, laughing coldly inside. In our previous life, Haley was the same, she always put me down in front of others to elevate herself. In this life, she was using this trick on Victor. She thought she was motivating him. But she didn't realize that for someone who was already introverted, and had low self-esteem, this was the greatest humiliation. I noticed that Victor's hands, accustomed to working with machine oil and components, still had black grease under his fingernails. Meanwhile Haley, newly married, had her nails painted bright red, making the contrast between the two even more stark. They were like two mismatched puzzle pieces forced together, wrong from the very beginning. That visit home ended unpleasantly with Haley's tears and Victor's silence. On the way back, Lucas was still grumbling. Your sister Haley really has problems. Marrying a useless man and treating him like a treasure. I watched the streetscape quickly receding outside the window and said softly, she's just unwilling to accept reality. Unwilling to accept that the potential stock she had chosen was proving worthless when faced with reality. But this was just the beginning. Haley's dream of being a goddess, or rather, the wife of a big boss, quickly began to take action. Every day she urged Victor to create new inventions. Based on vague memories from our previous life, she began describing future household appliances to Victor. Victor, you know how to make circuit boards. Can you try making a kettle that doesn't need boiling water? Just press a button and hot water comes out. And also, can you make a box where you put rice in, and it heats up by itself later? Oh, and a round disc that goes around the house sweeping dust by itself. I'm telling you, if you could make these things, we'd definitely get rich. What she described were the electric kettles, microwaves, and robot vacuum cleaners of the future. Unfortunately, she only knew the concepts but understood nothing about the basic principles. Victor listened in bewilderment, feeling like she was talking about fantasy. Haley, what you're describing is completely impractical. How is it impractical? Haley immediately flew into a rage. I don't care, the divine spirits told me this in my dreams. If you can't make them, it just means you're useless. Victor was pressured to the point where he had no choice. He didn't dare contradict the so-called divine revelation, so he reluctantly brought out what he had been secretly researching recently. It was an improved circuit diagram for a radio and some components he had traded from the scrap yard. Haley, what you described is too difficult. I've been researching this lately. He carefully spread the blueprint on the table like offering a treasure, cautiously explaining that he had optimized the circuit, doubling the reception capability while saving more power. If successfully made, it would definitely be better than the Hongsing brand radios on the market. In our previous life, this improved radio was the starting point of Victor's career. He relied on this patent to earn his first capital. But Haley only glanced at the blueprint covered with marks and the pile of scrap metal on the table, immediately showing undisguised disgust. Just this? Victor, I told you to make an earth-shaking invention, and you only show me this broken radio. How much is this thing worth? Can it help us move out of this run-down dormitory? Can it buy me a new dress? The more she spoke, the more frustrated she became, feeling that Victor was just going through the motions, wasting her prophetic abilities. I don't want to look at this junk. She swept her hand violently, causing the blueprint and components that Victor had spent several sleepless nights completing to scatter all over the floor. A precious semiconductor rolled under the bed with a crisp crack as it shattered. Victor's eyes immediately turned red. He jumped up and, for the first time, shouted at her. What are you doing? He crouched down frantically, picking up the components and blueprint like rescuing priceless treasures. Haley was startled by his shouting, then immediately became furious. What am I doing? I'm helping you. You worthless fool who doesn't know what's good for you. I've shown you the path to wealth, but you cling to this junk like it's treasure. Do you want to live in this miserable place your whole life? Do you want me to suffer with you? That night, their new-laid room erupted in fierce arguments for the first time. Victor's passion was dismissed as trash by Haley. Meanwhile, Haley's good intentions appeared to Victor as nothing but unreasonable humiliation. Neither of them knew that what Haley had swept under the bed that day wasn't just a component, but their entire bright future. While Haley and Victor argued loudly over scrap metal, I was walking down my own path of burning money. Under my gentle persuasion mixed with continuous suggestions, my father-in-law, Director Kenneth, finally made a bold decision. He emptied the family's entire savings, borrowed some more from old comrades, and gathered a total of 50,000 yuan to give to Lucas and me, telling us to go to Shenzhen to assess the situation. Before leaving, my mother-in-law gripped my hand with tears in her eyes. Vivian, this is more than half a lifetime's hard work for our whole family. You must consider this very carefully. I nodded firmly. Don't worry, mother. Leave it to me. In the late 1980s, spending 50,000 yuan to buy a house in a distant, unfamiliar village seemed like absolute madness to the entire factory. After we left, rumors spread throughout the factory. Did you hear? The Zhang family gave money to their daughter-in-law to take to Shenzhen and burn it all. The second daughter of the Lane family looks gentle, but she's quite persuasive, fooling the whole Zhang family into submission. She's definitely a spendthrift. Hearing these words made Haley even more smug. During dinner at our parents' home, she took every opportunity to mock and criticize me. Mother, look at Vivian, she really has no sense. Living peacefully but insisting on taking risks. I think the Zhang family will be ruined by her sooner or later. Mother also sighed, thinking I was too foolish and had brought shame to the Lane family. I didn't care at all. Lucas and I took the green train for 3 days and 2 nights, finally arriving in Shenzhen, a dusty land full of construction sites everywhere. Lucas looked at the scene before him, his face pale. Vivian, is this the golden land you talked about? This place is far worse than our factory area. I pulled his hand and pointed toward a recently planned area in the distance, my eyes shining brightly. Lucas, trust me. In less than 10 years, this place will be 100 times more prosperous than our factory and entire city. Every inch of land we buy here now will turn into real gold in the future. My determination and confidence infected Lucas. Finally, we used the 50,000 yuan to purchase 2 commercial apartments and 3 front shops outright in the Luohu and Fushun areas, which were still considered suburbs at the time. After completing the procedures, our money was completely gone. On the train ride back, Lucas was still in a daze. Vivian, did we really do the right thing? I leaned against his shoulder, looking out the window, my voice certain. Yes, we did the right thing. When we returned home, I didn't stop there. I knew the factory's restructuring was inevitable. Lucas's status as the director's son would soon become meaningless. I began encouraging him to learn a real trade. Lucas, don't you love cars? You hang out with the drivers every day. Why don't you learn from them how to repair cars? Hearing this, Lucas shook his head vigorously. I'm the director's son, how can I become a car mechanic? That would be so embarrassing. I patiently persuaded him. How is it embarrassing? Think about it, in the future when life gets better, every family will buy cars. When there are more cars, they'll need repairs. Then you'll be Master Lucas, in demand by everyone who needs their car fixed. Isn't that more prestigious than sitting in the factory all day doing nothing? Master Lucas. Lucas muttered, his eyes gradually brightening. Due to his vanity, he was once again convinced by me. He began seriously going to the repair shop, no longer drinking and gambling, but picking up wrenches to learn from the mechanics. Though his clothes were covered in grease, his eyes held light for the first time. In Haley's eyes, all of this was just me pushing my husband into another hole, a foolish act. She had no idea that what she had thrown away was Victor's dream, while I was personally laying a golden path for my husband and family. Once a crack appears, it only grows deeper. The conflicts between Victor and Haley during these days of poverty finally exploded. Victor wanted to continue researching the radio, but after Haley damaged it, several important components were lost. These components weren't sold in the market. He'd have to go to the electronics market in the provincial capital to buy them. Including travel expenses and purchasing costs, he needed at least 50 yuan. The family had little savings, and Victor's monthly salary was only about 80 yuan. This amount was truly enormous for him. He discussed with Haley, hoping she could advance some of her personal money for him to manage. Haley's face immediately darkened. Victor, are you still dreaming about that broken radio? I told you, that thing isn't worth anything. Can you stop being fanciful and focus on proper work? Victor was anxious. Haley, this isn't junk, it's my life's work, if I can just make it. So what if you make it? Haley interrupted harshly. Will it help you become a workshop supervisor? Will it help the factory assign us an apartment? She took out 2 bottles of Mao Tai, and 2 packs of Zhonghua cigarettes from the drawer, dowry gifts from her mother that she hadn't been willing to use. Take these things and give them to Supervisor Lee at the workshop. Say a few nice words and ask him to transfer you to an easier position, preferably to the supply department. That's where the real benefits are. Victor looked at the gifts, his face flushing red. Haley, I'm not going. I don't like doing those things. I just want to focus on technical work. Haley angrily slammed the liquor and cigarettes on the table. Victor, you really are a hopeless, stubborn fool with a brain like a block of wood. What era do you think this is? Just knowing technical skills won't get you anywhere. You need to build relationships. Understand? Under Haley's pressure and persuasion, Victor finally had to give in. He carried the gifts that felt heavy in his heart, and knocked on Supervisor Lee's door. But his nature wasn't suited for this kind of work. As soon as he met the supervisor, he became tongue-tied, his face red, placing the gifts on the table and stammering, "Supervisor Lee, please take more care of me." Then immediately fled. The result was counterproductive. Supervisor Lee thought he had discovered some weakness and was trying to threaten him with gifts. The next day, during the workshop meeting, Supervisor Lee indirectly criticized this corrupt behavior. Victor lost all face in front of his colleagues. When he came home, for the first time he didn't argue with Haley, just sat silently by the bed smoking one cigarette after another. The smoke made Haley cough violently. Look at your capabilities, you can't even give gifts properly. Why did I marry such a useless person like you? Haley's scolding was like an awl-piercing deep into Victor's heart. He suddenly looked up at the woman he had loved throughout his youth, his eyes filled with alienation and exhaustion. Suddenly, he remembered long ago, when he was still a quiet technician, once while he was tinkering with a broken component in the workshop, everyone laughed at him for worrying about worthless things. Only one girl silently stood behind him, watching him sweat profusely, then quietly handed him a clean handkerchief and a bottle of cool water. That girl was named Vivian. Back then, he thought Vivian was too quiet, too plain, not as brilliant as Haley. But now he desperately missed that quietness. For the first time, he began to doubt his choice from years ago. 5 full years passed. During these 5 years, Lucas's and my life changed completely. Shenzhen, that small rural village, had truly broken through at an unbelievable speed, just as I had predicted. The houses and shops we bought back then had increased in value more than tenfold. Initially, my in-laws didn't dare believe it. It wasn't until I brought real estate agents with signed rental contracts, handing them thick stacks of rental money, that they completely believed. From then on, my position in the Zhang household was no different from a living god of wealth. My in-laws spoiled me to the extreme, listening to everything I said. They bragged to everyone they met about their good fortune in marrying a daughter-in-law with such foresight. Lucas was no longer the idle rich boy of years past. His repair shop had expanded from a small store to a large workshop with over a dozen workers. Along with the increase in private cars, his business flourished daily. He got up early to work, and though it was hard, his income had far exceeded any cadre in the factory. When busy and with purpose, his spirit changed completely. He no longer indulged in drinking and gambling but devoted all his energy to work, becoming mature, steady, and responsible like a grown man. Our son was also 4 years old now, lively and adorable. Lucas would hold our child and often say to me emotionally, "Vivian, without you, I would have truly wasted my entire life." At the same time, our Hongsing machinery factory couldn't escape decline in the tide of the times. The machinery was old, orders decreased, and production efficiency grew worse daily. Rumors of reform and layoffs began spreading throughout the factory. Everyone was worried. Meanwhile, Haley and Victor still lived in that run-down dormitory compound. Over the past year, Victor had completely abandoned his research. Under Haley's daily complaints and pressure, the light in Victor's eyes had completely extinguished. He had become the most ordinary worker, going to work, getting off work, eating silently, then sleeping. Haley's temperament grew increasingly irritable. The life of a big boss's wife in her dreams still hadn't arrived. Instead, she had to watch me live better and better each day. The dissatisfaction and jealousy in her heart were almost devouring her whole. My sister no longer hoped Victor would invent anything, and placed all her faith in the permanent employment at the factory. She thought as long as she could keep her job, there would still be opportunities to turn things around. Unfortunately, she had once again bet on the wrong horse. She and I were like standing at a crossroads. She chose the path that seemed smooth but led straight to a cliff. Meanwhile, I chose the thorny path that led toward the light. When the great wave of the era crashed down, anyone swimming naked was clearly visible. In 1995, Hongsing Machinery Factory officially announced its restructuring. This news exploded like a bomb in the previously quiet residential compound. Permanent employment was shattered, and more than half the factory workers would face unemployment. In an instant, crying, cursing, and sighing echoed throughout the area. Many people had devoted their entire lives to the factory. Besides turning screws, they knew nothing else. Asking them to leave the factory was like throwing fish into a desert. They simply couldn't survive. Our family, having prepared in advance, wasn't greatly affected. My father-in-law processed his early retirement, received a generous settlement, and now spent his days contentedly tending flowers and birds. Lucas had left the factory long ago. His repair shop was thriving, and he hadn't cared about that salary for ages. But Haley and Victor weren't so fortunate. Both their names appeared on the first round of layoff lists. That day, the list was posted on the factory bulletin board with people crowded tightly around it. Haley squeezed in and looked from top to bottom. When she saw her and Victor's names clearly splayed, she froze completely. All of my sister's pride and hope came from her identity as a factory employee. Now that identity was gone, my sister was truly panicked. She rushed home and saw Victor silently packing his toolbox. She screamed frantically, "Victor, you useless fool. I told you to build relationships, to curry favor with the leadership, but you refused to go. Now look, we're both unemployed. Are you satisfied? Now we can go eat the northwest wind." Victor didn't respond, just meticulously wiped each wrench, pliers, and screwdriver clean before arranging them neatly in his toolbox. That toolbox was his only possession. Seeing him not answer, Haley grew even angrier. "Say something. Have you gone mute? What did you promise me before? You said you'd give me a good life. Is this the good life you meant?" Finally, Victor stopped. He looked up at the woman before him. her face distorted with anger, his eyes calm as a dead lake. "Haley," he softly called her name. "Let's get divorced." Those 5 words had more killing power than any argument. Haley stood stunned, unable to believe her ears. The man who had obeyed her for years, whom she had always called useless, now wanted a divorce. "What? What did you just say?" "I said let's get divorced," Victor repeated without any wavering in his voice. "I've had enough of this house." With that, he closed his toolbox, picked it up, and walked out the door that had confined him for years without looking back. Haley collapsed to the floor, staring at the empty doorway, finally bursting into uncontrollable tears. She couldn't understand how everything had turned out this way. She clearly held the correct answer, so why had she failed so miserably? She thought and thought, but couldn't figure out where she had gone wrong in this life. Unemployment and divorce, for Haley, these were devastating blows. She had become completely defeated. Initially, she wanted to rely on support from our parents' home. But our parents were also old with meager pensions, and couldn't bear the burden of her just sitting around waiting to be fed. Before long, she found herself at a dead end. For food and clothing, she had to swallow her former pride and start doing manual labor. She had washed dishes at restaurants, carried bricks at construction sites, and sold vegetables at the market. Sun, wind, and heavy labor quickly wore away the beauty she had once been proud of. Her hands became rough and calloused. Wrinkles and dark spots appeared on her face. She looked more than 10 years older than her actual age. The radiant factory beauty Haley had completely disappeared. In her place was a bitter, shrewish woman ready to argue for half a day over a few coins. After leaving Haley, Victor truly relied on that toolbox to set up a small electronics repair stall by the roadside. Televisions, radios, and washing machines were all precious items at that time. When they broke, no one could bear to throw them away. Victor was skilled, reasonably priced, and honest, so he quickly gained some reputation. Many people would travel several extra kilometers to bring their items to him for repair. Hearing this news, Haley felt utterly ashamed. She thought Victor was doing a lowly profession that brought shame to her. She even ran to his stall to cause a scene, cursing him as a greasy electronics repairman with no future. Victor just silently looked at her, his eyes holding no love or hatred, just coldness. Later, Haley heard that our family had bought several shops right in the city center, earning over 10,000 yuan monthly just from rent. Lucas's repair shop was also expanding, buying new equipment and planning to purchase land in the suburbs to build a new workshop. This news became the last straw. The snake of jealousy once again tore at her heart. She couldn't understand why it was like this. Why? Holding the script of the future, her life had become so miserable. Why could someone as stupid as Vivian, marrying a useless man, live the life she had always dreamed of? She wasn't willing to accept it. She believed that Vivian had stolen the life that rightfully belonged to her. She believed that Vivian had destroyed everything that was hers. That resentment took root and sprouted like a mad seed in her heart, eventually growing into a hideous, evil tree. My sister began appearing around our house like a ghost. She would hide in corners, watching me, Lucas, and our car with poisonous eyes, watching the happy smiles of our family of 3. I knew my sister was about to go mad. Just like in our previous life when she dragged me into that truck. The storm was about to hit. That day I drove to the city center to check the renovation progress of our newly purchased shop. Lucas sat in the passenger seat, humming softly, in a very good mood. At an intersection, the red light came on. I stopped the car and unconsciously turned my head, suddenly seeing a familiar figure by the roadside. It was Victor. He was squatting on a low plastic stool with a plastic sheet spread in front of him, covered with various tools and disassembled components. In front of him was a crooked sign reading, "Professional Repair, TVs, refrigerators, washing machines." It was the end of the workday, and the busy pedestrians didn't even glance at him. He wore an old, faded work uniform, his hands covered in grease, his hair disheveled, head bent in concentration as he turned a screw. The sunlight cast long shadows of his thin figure. Looking at him, countless emotions welled up in my heart. In our previous life, he had started the same way, except then I was beside him. I would bring him meals, give him water, and stay with him when he worked late into the night drawing blueprints. His first improved product was a small radio that I helped him assemble. The first patent fee he earned was also placed in my hands. But in this life, there was no one beside him. He was starting too late and facing too many hardships. Isn't that Victor? Lucas also saw him and was somewhat surprised. Over the years, Lucas had changed completely, no longer the harsh and frivolous young master of the past. He opened the car door and got out. "Master Victor," he politely greeted. Victor looked up startled, seeing us, his eyes flashing with embarrassment and awkwardness. He reflexively hid his grease-covered hands behind his back, his lips moving but unable to speak. "How's business?" Lucas took out cigarettes from his pocket and offered one to Victor. Victor waved his hand and bowed his head, his voice very small. "Just enough to get by." Lucas patted his shoulder and said, "Having skills means never going hungry. Keep working hard. If you need any help, just come find me at the workshop." With that, he returned to the car. The green light came on, and I started the engine. Through the rearview mirror, I saw Victor still standing there dazed, watching the direction our car had gone. His eyes were very complex, containing jealousy, disappointment, and a regret I couldn't fully understand. I knew he probably realized what he had missed years ago. Unfortunately, life has no what-ifs. Choose the wrong path and there's no going back. Lucas's kindness was interpreted by Haley as blatant showing off and humiliation. I don't know where she heard about this, but that evening she went completely mad and charged straight to our house. At that time, our whole family was gathered happily around the dinner table in a warm, joyful atmosphere. She kicked the door open and burst in like a demon, her eyes bloodshot, hair disheveled. "Vivian, come out here." My mother-in-law jumped up startled and shouted, "Haley, are you crazy?" Haley paid no attention, just stared at me with eyes that seemed ready to devour me alive. "Did you know beforehand? Did you know Victor would be this useless, and that the Zhang family would become wealthy? You deliberately gave Victor to me, stuffing this pile of trash into my hands, just to watch me lose face, didn't you?" Her hoarse voice screeched piercingly. The entire living room fell silent. Lucas and my in-laws all looked confused, not understanding what she meant by gave. Only I calmly looked at her, my heart unmoved. "Haley, you chose your own path." I set down my chopsticks and said indifferently, "Ha." Hearing the most ridiculous thing ever, she burst into mad laughter. "I chose, it was clearly your scheme. If I had been the one to marry him back then, he would have gotten rich long ago, right? If I had been the one to marry him, he'd be driving cars and living in a big house now, and I would be the boss's wife. Based on what? I clearly chose him first. Based on what did you end up with all the good things?" Her words contained too many implications, making Lucas frown. "Haley, what nonsense are you talking about? What do you mean you chose first? Didn't you cry and insist on marrying Victor that year?" "That was me." Haley was speechless. Of course she couldn't say she was reborn, she could only pour all her resentment onto me. "It was you. You're the one who harmed me." She pointed straight at me, turning to Lucas. "Lucas, don't let her fool you. This woman is very scheming. She knew long ago that you would become rich, so she latched onto you." I looked at my sister's frenzied appearance and smiled slightly. "Sister, did you forget? That year, you said Victor was a hidden dragon beneath the abyss who would definitely achieve great success. You said marrying Lucas would be unfortunate for me. You said to leave that heaven-sent blessing for me. Why are you denying it now?" Each sentence I spoke was like a knife stabbing straight into her heart. Haley's face immediately turned pale. She pointed at me, her lips trembling, unable to utter a word. Finally, she screamed and turned to flee. Disappearing into the night, the living room fell into silence. Lucas and my in-laws looked at me with probing eyes. I calmly looked back at them, knowing very clearly that from today on, there would be no secrets in this house. But it didn't matter, because now I no longer needed to depend on anyone. After that commotion, any remaining connection between Haley and Victor was completely severed. I heard that Victor packed all his belongings that night, bought a train ticket south, and left cleanly without leaving a word. Haley lost her last support and became the laughingstock of the entire factory. She no longer came to cause trouble for me. Her whole being seemed drained of life, becoming silent and listless. Our parents worried about her and advised her to move back home, but she refused, still clinging alone to that empty dormitory room, surviving on odd jobs and our parents' subsidies. Meanwhile, I began doing something else. After the restructuring, many workers who lost their jobs fell into hardship. Most were honest laborers with skills and work ethic. They just lacked opportunity and some initial capital. Using Lucas's repair shop as a front, I established a small assistance fund, specifically to help unemployed workers who wanted to start their own businesses with interest-free startup loans. The amounts weren't large, just 1,000 or 2,000 yuan, but for them, it was a lifeline in desperate times. Some used this money to open breakfast stalls by the roadside. Some bought three-wheeled carts to sell vegetables around the city. Skilled craftsmen used the capital to open small mechanical workshops. My actions caused a big stir in the factory. Many said the director's family had given birth to a living bodhisattva. Initially, Lucas didn't understand, thinking I was throwing money out the window. I told him, "Lucas, part of the money we've earned comes from benefiting from this era. Now we're just giving back a small portion to this era, to the uncles and aunties who grew up with us. Moreover, this is also a way to build reputation for you in our workshop." Lucas understood. He not only fully supported me but also actively participated, using his connections and resources to help these entrepreneurial workers. When his shop needed to buy parts, he would prioritize the mechanical stores of these former workers. When the factory needed catering suppliers for the cafeteria, he would recommend the breakfast vendor lady. Lucas's reputation in the factory grew better and better. People no longer called him the director's spoiled son, but respectfully called him Boss Zhang. He sincerely said to me, "Vivian, thank you. Without you, I would be nothing." I smiled and held his hand tightly. In this life, I hadn't just changed my own fate, I had changed his too. Though we didn't become great tycoons like Victor in our previous life, we had worked hard together, step by step finding our own value. This life might not be brilliantly glorious, but it was peaceful enough and happy enough. A few years later, our life became prosperous and smooth. Lucas's repair shop had developed into the city's largest automotive service company. The shops registered under my name were also generating skyrocketing rental income. We moved to a larger house, our son entered the best elementary school in the city, and our parents were brought to live with us, enjoying their golden years in peace. Looking at Lucas and me, they often said emotionally, "We're truly blessed, a blind cat catching a dead rat." I just smiled without explanation, because I knew clearly that everything we had today wasn't due to luck, but because I had created it step by step. As for Haley, she later moved back to our parents' old house to live alone. I heard her personality became increasingly strange, with very little contact with anyone. Occasionally we sent money and goods over, but she either wouldn't accept them or accepted them without saying a word. We had long been strangers like people from different worlds. The sister who once bloomed like a summer flower had finally withered in the winter of her own choosing. One weekend afternoon, the weather was beautiful. Lucas drove our newly purchased Audi, taking our son and me to the suburbs for a weekend getaway. The car slowly passed through the city's busiest market district. Amid the noisy clamor, a shrill woman's voice suddenly penetrated the glass and entered my ears. "Your vegetables are all wilted leaves, and you dare charge 50 cents per caddy. Why don't you just go rob people?" I reflexively turned my head and saw a woman in an old gray coat with messy, dry hair pointing at a vegetable vendor and cursing loudly. Her face was flushed red with anger, spittle flying from the corners of her mouth. That face was haggard and aged but extremely familiar. It was Haley. In that moment, time seemed to distort strangely. In our previous life when I died, the last image I saw was also my sister's face, twisted by jealousy as she screamed, "Based on what?" Now here she was again, arguing until her face was red and her ears purple over a few coins worth of vegetables, like a marketplace shrew. Still the same scene, still the same unwillingness to accept reality. Only the protagonist had changed. Lucas also saw her. He frowned and was about to say something. I gently shook my head, then calmly rolled up the car window, cutting off all the noise and squalor outside. The car continued rolling forward, heading toward the sunlight-filled suburbs. I looked at my gentle husband beside me, and our adorable son behind us, finally allowing a smile of relief from the bottom of my heart to bloom at the corners of my mouth. In this life, I had escaped that ridiculous cycle of fate. I didn't become anyone's dependent, nor did I become anyone's stepping stone. Vivian, I had lived as myself. Several years later, our lives became prosperous and peaceful. Lucas's repair shop had grown into the city's largest automotive service company. The shops registered under my name were also bringing in rapidly increasing rental income. We moved to a larger house, our son enrolled in the city's best elementary school, and my parents were brought to live with us, enjoying their golden years in comfort. Looking at Lucas and me, they often said emotionally, "We're truly blessed. A blind cat catching a dead rat." I just smiled without explanation, because I knew clearly that everything we had achieved wasn't due to luck, but because I had built it step by step. As for Haley, she later moved back to live alone in our parents' old house. I heard her personality became increasingly eccentric, rarely interacting with anyone. Occasionally we would send money and supplies over, but she would either refuse them or accept without saying a word. Between us, we had long been strangers, like people from different worlds. The sister who once bloomed brilliantly like a summer flower had finally withered in the winter of her own choosing. One weekend afternoon, the weather was beautiful. Lucas drove our newly purchased Audi, taking our son and me to the suburbs for a weekend retreat. The car slowly passed through the city's busiest market district. Amid the noisy commotion, a shrill woman's voice suddenly pierced through the car window into my ears. "Your family's vegetables are all wilted leaves, and you dare charge 50 cents per caddy. Why don't you just go rob people instead?" I reflexively turned my head and saw a woman wearing an old gray coat with disheveled, dry hair pointing at a vegetable vendor and cursing loudly. Her face was flushed red with anger, with spittle flying from the corners of her mouth. That face was haggard and aged, but extremely familiar. It was Haley. In that moment, time seemed to warp strangely. In our previous life when I died, the last image I saw was also my sister's face twisted with jealousy, screaming why? Based on what? Now here she was again, arguing over a few coins worth of vegetables until her face was red and her ears purple, like a marketplace shrew. Still the same scene, still the same unwillingness to accept reality. Only the protagonist had changed. Lucas also noticed her. He frowned and was about to say something. I gently shook my head, then calmly rolled up the car window, blocking out all the noise and squalor outside. The car continued moving forward, heading toward the sunlight-filled suburbs. I looked at my gentle husband beside me and our adorable son behind us, finally allowing a smile of genuine relief to bloom at the corners of my mouth. The car continued moving forward, heading toward the sunlight-filled suburbs. I looked at my gentle husband beside me and our adorable son behind us, finally allowing a smile of genuine relief to bloom at the corners of my mouth. In this life, I had escaped that ridiculous cycle of fate. I had not become anyone's dependent, nor had I served as anyone's stepping stone. Vivian, I had lived as myself. I had become no one's appendage, and I had served as no one's stepping stone. Vivian, I had lived as myself. True success stems from patient cultivation of genuine skills and relationships, not from shortcuts or envious competition. Haley's downfall wasn't bad luck. It was her refusal to nurture what she had. She dismissed Victor's talents, demanding instant gratification over gradual growth. Meanwhile, Vivian succeeded by recognizing potential, supporting her partner's development, and making strategic long-term investments. The story reveals that knowing the future means nothing without the wisdom to execute properly. Character matters more than circumstances. Those who build others up while building themselves create lasting prosperity, while those consumed by jealousy and impatience inevitably self-destruct. Thank you for listening on Garden Story. If you enjoy it, please like, comment, and subscribe. Wishing you happy listening.